6 months after the choice incident, I thought we had finally found our rhythm at Thornfield. The children who chose freedom were adjusting to normal life with their new foster families. The ones who kept their abilities were learning to control them better, preparing for their eventual transformation at 18. I was wrong about having found our rhythm. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when Zara didn't come down for breakfast. She was always punctual, always polite, always exactly where she was supposed to be. When I went to check on her, I found her standing at her bedroom window, staring out at the parking lot. "Zara? You missed breakfast." She didn't turn around. "My mother is here." I looked out the window. The parking lot was empty except for staff cars. "I don't see anyone. She's not here yet, but she's coming. I can feel the pact pulling at me." That was the first time any of the children had mentioned feeling their original contracts since the choice incident. I thought those connections had been severed. "The pacts that were broken are still broken," Zara said, reading my expression. "But mine wasn't broken. I chose to keep my abilities, remember? That means the contract is still active." "But you're 7. The contracts don't activate until 18. They don't collect until 18, but they can still be called in early if the parent wants to cut their losses." I immediately called Dr. Marsh. She was in her office within minutes, and after talking to Zara, she made a series of phone calls that lasted until lunchtime. When she finished, her expression was grim. "It's not just Zara's mother," she told me. 3 other parents have filed claims to recollect their children. They're arguing that the choice incident violated their original contracts. Can they do that? According to the Department of Specialized Child Services, there's a legal gray area. The parents are hiring supernatural lawyers and enforcement specialists. Enforcement specialists? Mercenaries, people who specialize in collecting on supernatural debts. That afternoon, Dr. Marsh called an emergency meeting with all staff. She explained the situation and introduced new protocols. "Effective immediately, we're operating under siege conditions," she announced. "Here are the new rules, and they are not negotiable. Rule 1. All children must stay in groups of 3 or more at all times. Rule 2. No staff member works alone. Always have a partner. Rule 3. Trust no adult who claims to be a parent or relative. Rule 4. If you see armed strangers on the property, activate the emergency alarm immediately. Rule 5. All children stay away from windows and doors unless specifically escorted." "How long will these rules be in effect?" asked Patricia, one of the day shift workers. "Until the legal challenges are resolved, or until the threat is neutralized," Dr. Marsh replied. I raised my hand. "What kind of mercenaries are we talking about? Regular people with guns, or something else?" "Both. The parents have hired human mercenaries for conventional assault and supernatural specialists for dealing with the children's abilities. Over the next week, we turned Thornfield into a fortress. The department sent security contractors to install reinforced doors, bulletproof windows, and a fence around the entire property. They also assigned 2 agents to live on site and coordinate our defense." Agent Reynolds was a tall woman with silver hair who carried herself like former military. Agent Ortega was younger, maybe early 30s, and had scars on his hands that looked like bite marks. They both carried weapons I didn't recognize and spoke in the kind of shorthand that comes from working together for years. "The first wave will be human mercenaries," Agent Reynolds explained during our security briefing. "They'll try to breach the perimeter and grab children quickly. Standard kidnapping tactics, but well-funded and professional." "What about the second wave?" I asked. "Supernatural specialists. They'll come after the human team fails. These are people who deal with entities like the one that made all those original pacts. They have tools and methods specifically designed to override the children's abilities." "Can we fight them?" "We can try," Agent Ortega said. but our main job is to buy time for reinforcements to arrive." The children took the new security measures remarkably well. Zara helped explain to the younger ones why they needed to stay together and away from windows. The older children who had kept their abilities began practicing using them defensively. Felix, who could only eat burned food, discovered he could char other things too. He spent hours in the courtyard teaching himself to burn handprints into concrete blocks. By the end of the week, he could superheat metal doorknobs from across a room and melt plastic zip ties just by looking at them. Vera learned to use her thought-disrupting ability intentionally, practicing on volunteers who tried to complete simple tasks while looking at her. She got so good at it that she could make people forget their own names for up to 10 minutes, or cause trained soldiers to mix up basic weapon safety procedures. Tobias discovered that his constant staring could do more than just unnerve people. When he focused intently on moving objects, they would slow down and eventually stop completely. He practiced on thrown balls until he could freeze them in midair. Sage, who we hadn't known much about before, revealed he could see the structure of anything, not just supernatural entities, but machines, buildings, even complex plans. He spent days studying the facility's blueprints until he could predict exactly how much damage different areas could take. Ren's backward speech turned out to confuse more than just humans. When she spoke to the facility's security cameras, they would malfunction and start recording in reverse. Electronic locks would open when she told them to stay closed in her inverted way. Even Rosemary, who usually just drew pictures of dying flowers, started growing actual plants. But these weren't normal flowers. They were thick vines with thorns as sharp as needles and leaves that secreted a clear fluid that made people dizzy if they breathed it in. Clover, who had chosen freedom, was one of the children living with a foster family now. But she came to visit sometimes, and during one visit, she brought a gift for the children who stayed, 12 stuffed animals with their eyes intact. "I don't need to pull them out anymore," she explained to me. But I remembered how to see what's really there instead of what looks normal. It turned out that was a useful skill. 3 days later, Clover was the one who spotted the fake delivery truck. "That's not a real delivery person," she said, pointing out the dining room window. "He's trying too hard to look normal." I called for Agent Reynolds, who took one look through binoculars and activated the alarm. "All children to the safe room. Now." We had drilled this procedure every day for a week. The children moved quickly but calmly to the reinforced basement room that had been expanded since Zara's isolation. Agent Ortega stayed with them while the rest of us prepared for whatever was coming. The fake delivery truck was joined by 2 more vehicles, a van and a black SUV. 6 people got out, all wearing matching uniforms and carrying military-grade weapons. "Professional team," Agent Reynolds observed. "Expensive equipment. Someone paid a lot of money for this operation." They didn't bother with subtlety. The team leader used some kind of device to cut through our reinforced fence like it was paper. They moved toward the building in formation, covering each other's advance. "Remember," Agent Reynolds told the staff, "our job is not to fight them. Our job is to delay them and protect the children." The mercenaries breached the front door using explosive charges. The blast shook the entire building, but our reinforced interior doors held. Agent Reynolds and 2 security contractors engaged them in the main hallway while the rest of us fell back to secondary positions. The gunfire was louder than I expected. Not like in movies where people can talk over the shooting. This was overwhelming noise that made thinking difficult. I was stationed at the stairwell with Patricia and one of the contractors, watching for anyone who made it past the main defense. 2 mercenaries did make it past. They moved up the stairs fast, using hand signals to coordinate. The contractor fired at them, but they had body armor and training. One of them put 3 rounds in his chest before he could get behind cover. That's when Vera appeared at the top of the stairs. She had disobeyed orders by leaving the safe room, but her timing was perfect. The mercenaries looked up at her, and I watched their coordination fall apart instantly. One of them tried to reload his weapon but couldn't remember how. The other kept starting to aim but forgetting what he was aiming at. Patricia and I were able to restrain both mercenaries while their minds struggled with Vera's ability. By the time they recovered, the rest of their team had been captured or driven off. First wave neutralized, Agent Reynolds announced over the radio. Prepare for Wave 2. The supernatural specialists arrived that night. There were only 3 of them, but they moved like they owned the place. They walked through our reinforced fence without opening it. They ignored our floodlights and motion sensors. They approached the building like they already knew exactly where every child was sleeping. Agent Ortega met them at the front door. "This facility is under federal protection," he announced. "Turn around and leave." The lead specialist was a woman in her 50s, wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase. She looked like someone's accountant. "We're here to collect property that belongs to our clients," she said. "We have legal documentation. Your documentation isn't valid here." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a document covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "This supersedes your federal authority." Agent Ortega drew his weapon. "Ma'am, I need you to put that away and leave the premises." She read something from the document in a language I didn't recognize. Agent Ortega's gun simply stopped working. He pulled the trigger repeatedly, but nothing happened. "Technology doesn't function properly around active contracts," the woman explained. "Your weapons, your radios, your vehicles, none of it will work until we leave." The specialists didn't leave like I expected them to. Instead, Mrs. Bellwether smiled. "Actually, we're not here for collection," she said. "We're here for termination." "What does that mean?" Agent Ortega demanded. "It means the parents decided that if they can't have their investments back, no one can. They've hired us to eliminate the children who chose freedom and neutralize the ones who kept their abilities." She opened her briefcase again and pulled out a different document. This one was written in red ink. "Termination contracts override collection agreements. We don't need to take the children alive." Agent Ortega reached for his backup weapon, but Mrs. Bellwether held up a hand. "Your guns won't work until we're finished, but we're not here to fight you today. We're here to deliver a message." "What message?" "Tomorrow at sunset, 12 families will arrive to reclaim their children. They're bringing everything they can afford: human mercenaries, supernatural specialists, and contract enforcement entities that make us look like amateur babysitters." She handed Agent Ortega a piece of paper covered in names I didn't recognize. "These are the parents involved. Some of them made pacts with things that weren't particularly interested in human children. They were only interested in the power those children could generate. Now that the power is threatened, those entities want compensation." "What kind of compensation?" "The kind that involves burning this entire facility to the ground and making sure no other parent ever gets the idea that their pact can be modified or broken." Mrs. Bellwether closed her briefcase and turned to leave. "We're being merciful by warning you. Most of our colleagues wouldn't bother. But professional courtesy requires that we give you time to evacuate non-essential personnel. And if we don't evacuate, then tomorrow will be very unpleasant for everyone involved." The 3 specialists walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond our floodlights. Agent Ortega immediately called for emergency reinforcements, while Dr. Marsh gathered all staff for another meeting. "Everyone who doesn't absolutely need to be here should leave tonight," she announced. "This is going to be much worse than what we faced today." Several staff members took her up on the offer. Patricia stayed, along with 3 others who had been at Thornfield for years. Agent Reynolds contacted her superiors and was told that a full tactical team would arrive by morning. "Will it be enough?" I asked her. "Against 12 families worth of supernatural mercenaries? Probably not. But we'll make them work for it." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the children in the safe room and how they had followed the new rules perfectly, even when explosions were shaking the building above them. Around midnight, I went down to check on them. They were all awake, sitting in a circle, holding hands. "We know what's coming tomorrow," Zara said when she saw me. We can feel them gathering. The tactical team will be here by morning. We're going to protect you. I know you'll try. But there are too many of them, and they're bringing things that were never meant to exist in the same space as children. Tobias, who still never blinked, spoke up. We want to help fight. Absolutely not. You stay in this room until it's over. Marcus, Vera said gently, you've spent years keeping us safe by following rules. But tomorrow, the rules won't be enough. We need to use everything we have. I looked at their faces. These children I had worked with for years, who trusted me to keep them safe. There's something else, Zara added. The parents aren't just bringing mercenaries. They're bringing the entities they made pacts with. Our other parents, the ones we've never met. What does that mean? It means tomorrow isn't just about human parents trying to reclaim their children. It's about the entities that created us trying to correct what they see as a mistake. What mistake? Giving us choices, letting us modify contracts, allowing children to have any power over their own fates. She squeezed my hand. Tomorrow is going to decide whether pact-born children ever get to choose their futures again, or whether we go back to being property that gets collected when convenient. I spent the rest of the night helping Agent Reynolds and the newly arrived tactical team prepare defensive positions. By sunrise, Thornfield looked like a military compound. But as I watched the sun come up, I had a feeling that all our preparations wouldn't be enough for what was coming at sunset. The tactical team that arrived consisted of 12 agents, each carrying equipment I had never seen before. Agent Commander Walsh briefed us at dawn. We're dealing with a coordinated assault from multiple supernatural entities and their human contractors, he explained. Our intelligence suggests they'll hit us from 3 directions simultaneously. He pointed to a map of the facility. Human mercenaries will breach the front gate. Supernatural specialists will attack from the east wing, and the entities themselves will manifest somewhere in the courtyard. What's our strategy? Dr. Marsh asked. Containment and elimination. We hold defensive positions until the children can be evacuated. The children aren't evacuating, Zara said from the doorway. She had somehow gotten out of the safe room again, despite multiple locks and 2 guards. Zara, you need to get back downstairs, I said. No, Marcus. We've made our decision. All of us. We're going to fight. Agent Commander Walsh shook his head. Absolutely not. Our job is to protect you. Your job is to help us protect ourselves. There's a difference. Before anyone could respond, alarms started blaring. Through the windows, we could see vehicles approaching from 3 directions, just like Commander Walsh had predicted. They're early, Agent Reynolds observed. Sun's not down yet. They don't care about timing anymore, Zara said. They just want this finished. The first explosions hit the front gate. The human mercenaries had brought more firepower this time. Not just assault rifles, but actual military hardware. The gate disintegrated under rocket fire. Agent Reynolds positioned her team in the main hallway, while Commander Walsh's tactical unit took the upper floors. I was assigned to stay with Dr. Marsh and coordinate communications. That's when the east wing exploded. The blast was different from the front gate. This one twisted the building in ways that hurt to look at. The supernatural specialists had brought tools designed to break more than just walls. East Wing Team, report, Commander Walsh called into his radio. Static replied. East Wing Team, please respond. More static, then a voice that definitely wasn't human. East Wing Team is indisposed. We're coming for the children now. The tactical agents opened fire on something moving through the ruined East Wing. Their bullets seemed to hit targets, but the gunfire stopped abruptly. Then screaming started. Fall back to secondary positions, Commander Walsh ordered. But there weren't any secondary positions anymore. The building was being torn apart by forces that regular weapons couldn't touch. That's when the children emerged from the safe room. All 11 of them, moving in formation like they had drilled this maneuver for years. Zara led them up the stairs while the building shook around us. "Children, get back to safety immediately," Dr. Marsh called. "We are staying safe," Vera replied, "by fighting back." The first supernatural specialist rounded the corner, a tall man wearing what looked like medieval armor, but moved like it was made of liquid. He carried a weapon that resembled a cross between a sword and a lightning rod. Vera looked directly at him. His advance stopped immediately. He tried to raise his weapon but couldn't remember how. He attempted to speak an incantation but forgot the words halfway through. Within seconds, he was standing there confused, holding equipment he no longer understood how to use. Agent Reynolds put 3 rounds in his chest. The armor absorbed the first 2, but the third one found a gap and dropped him. "One down," she reported. 47 to go, Zara said calmly. 47? That's how many are coming. We can sense them all. More explosions shook the building as mercenaries breached the front doors. The tactical team engaged them with covering fire, but these weren't ordinary soldiers. They moved with coordination that suggested supernatural enhancement. Felix appeared at the top of the stairs, and suddenly the air filled with the smell of burning meat. The lead mercenary's rifle barrel glowed red-hot in his hands. He dropped it, screaming, but Felix was already focusing on the next weapon. Within 30 seconds, every gun the mercenaries carried had become too hot to hold. They retreated to the parking lot, leaving their equipment behind. "Nice work," Commander Walsh told Felix. "Thanks. But the real threats haven't arrived yet." He was right. The human mercenaries and supernatural specialists were just the opening act. Through the broken windows, we could see them gathering in the courtyard. The entities that had made the original Pacts. They looked like people at first glance. Men and women in expensive clothing, standing calmly while their hired armies fought around them. But the longer you looked, the more obvious it became that they weren't human. Their faces stayed exactly the same regardless of the expression they were supposed to be making. Their clothes moved in wind that wasn't there, and when they spoke to each other, their voices came from the wrong directions. 12 entities, Zara confirmed. The ones who made pacts with our parents. What do they want? To take back what they gave us. Our abilities, our choices, our futures. They want to reset everything to the way it was before we learned we could modify contracts. Can they do that? If they kill all of us, yes, the precedent dies with us. The entities began walking toward the building. They moved in perfect synchronization, like they were all controlled by the same mind. That's when I realized this wasn't really about collecting children or honoring contracts. This was about power. These entities had spent decades creating children with supernatural abilities, but they never expected those children to develop independence. The first entity reached the front door. Agent Reynolds and her team opened fire, but the bullets passed through it like it was made of mist. "Physical weapons won't work on the entities," Commander Walsh announced. "Tactical teams fall back. Let the children handle this." I wanted to argue, but I could see he was right. Our guns and explosives were useless against targets that could choose whether to be solid or not. The entities flowed into the building like liquid nightmare. They moved up the stairs, down the hallways, through the walls themselves. Within minutes, we were surrounded. "Children of our creation," the entities spoke in unison, their voices echoing from every surface. "You have broken laws that existed before your species learned to make fire. You have modified contracts that were written in the foundation of reality itself. We have exercised rights that you never told our parents we possessed," Zara replied. "You possess no rights. You are property, valuable property that has been damaged by improper handling." "We disagree." The entities moved closer, and I could feel something pressing against my mind. Like someone trying to read my thoughts, but with fingernails. "Your disagreement is irrelevant. We are here to reclaim what belongs to us. and ensure that future children understand their proper place. That's when the battle really began. Tobias, who never blinked, focused his steady gaze on the nearest entity. It stopped moving, locked in place by whatever force let him see everything without ever looking away. Rosemary dropped a handful of seeds on the floor. They sprouted instantly, growing into thorny vines that wrapped around 3 entities, holding them still while poison sap soaked through their clothing. Clover, who had chosen freedom but come back to help, pointed at the entities trapped by Rosemary's vines. "Those aren't real," she announced. "They're wearing people shapes, but underneath they look like..." She paused, searching for words. "Like math that got angry." Felix stepped forward and began burning away the fake human appearances. The entity's true forms were revealed, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, made of angles that bent in directions that shouldn't exist. But even without their human disguises, they kept fighting. One entity grabbed Agent Reynolds and began draining something from her. She aged 20 years in as many seconds, her hair turning gray, her face gaining wrinkles. Vera tried to disrupt its thoughts, but entities didn't think the way humans did. Her ability had no effect. That's when Sage, one of the children who had chosen to keep his abilities, did something I had never seen before. He reached out and grabbed the entity's true form, the angry mathematical pattern that Clover could see, and simply untied it. The entity came apart like a knot being undone. Its pieces scattered across the room, twitching once, then going still. Agent Reynolds stopped aging and collapsed, breathing heavily, but alive. "They can be destroyed," Sage announced. "But you have to grab their real shape, not the person costume they're wearing." The battle intensified. More entities flowed into the building while the children worked together to identify and destroy them. Some entities fought back by trying to possess the adults in the room. I felt one of them pressing into my mind, trying to take control. That's when Ren, who spoke backwards, said something that hurt my ears, but drove the entity out of my head immediately. "Works," she announced. "Backwards talking does. Understand it, can't they?" But the entities were learning. 3 of them grabbed Commander Walsh's tactical agents and began draining their life force the same way they had attacked Agent Reynolds. The agents aged rapidly, their hair graying, their faces wrinkling. Rosemary responded by dropping seeds throughout the room. Her vines erupted from the floor like living whips, wrapping around the life-draining entities. But instead of just holding them, the vines began pumping that clear, dizzy-making fluid directly into the entities' fake human forms. The entities stumbled, their coordination failing as Rosemary's plant toxins disrupted whatever passed for their nervous systems. Sage used the opportunity to grab their real mathematical forms and began untying them systematically. One entity, realizing what was happening, abandoned stealth entirely. It dropped its human disguise and revealed itself as a writhing mass of burning geometric shapes. It lashed out with appendages made of pure calculation, trying to solve the children out of existence through some kind of mathematical violence. Tobias locked eyes with it, and the entity's attack froze halfway to its target. Its burning equations hung in the air, unable to complete themselves while under his unblinking gaze. Felix stepped up and began superheating the entity's mathematical structure. The burning shapes turned white-hot, then started to melt like wax. The entity screamed in frequencies that made the windows vibrate. "Get the small ones," Sage called out, pointing to 3 child-sized entities that had been hiding behind the larger ones. "They're coordinators. They're telling the others how to fight us." Zara nodded and began singing. Not the chorus that called to other children, but something else. A song that seemed to unravel the coordinator entities' connection to each other. As her voice rose, the 3 small entities began moving independently instead of as a group. That's when Patricia, who had been quietly helping evacuate staff, grabbed a fire extinguisher and charged one of the confused coordinator entities. She sprayed it with chemical foam, and to everyone's surprise, the entity's geometric form began dissolving like sugar in water. "Fire suppression foam works on them," she announced. "Whatever they're made of doesn't like chemical suppressants." Agent Reynolds, still recovering from being aged, crawled to a supply closet and started throwing fire extinguishers to anyone who could use them. Soon the air was full of white foam as staff members and tactical agents began spraying every entity they could reach. The combination was devastating. Children identifying and disrupting entities, adults spraying them with foam, and everyone working together to systematically destroy the attacking force. The children had found their rhythm. Clover identified real forms. Sage untied them. Felix burned away disguises. Vera disrupted any entity that tried to think like a human, and Tobias held them still with his unblinking stare. But there were still too many entities, and not enough children. That's when Zara did something unexpected. She began calling to other children, not just the ones at Thornfield, but Pact-born children around the world. The same chorus from months ago started up again, but louder this time. Voices from dozens of facilities, hundreds of foster homes, thousands of children who had been given choices and decided they wanted to keep choosing. The entities faltered. Their synchronized movement broke down as they realized they weren't just fighting 11 children in one building. They were fighting every Pact-born child who had ever been offered freedom. "This ends now," the lead entity declared. It abandoned its human disguise entirely and revealed its true form, a massive geometric pattern that filled half the room, all sharp angles and burning lines. It reached for Zara with appendages made of pure mathematics. That's when every child in the building attacked at once. Felix superheated the air around the entity until its angles started to warp. Vera disrupted its thinking patterns while Sage grabbed its core structure. Rosemary's vines wrapped around its computational processes, introducing organic chaos into its rigid logic. The entity screamed, a sound like equations being solved incorrectly. It began to collapse in on itself, its mathematical structure failing. But as it died, it spoke one last time. "If we cannot have our property back, then no one can have it." The building started shaking as every remaining entity began self-destructing simultaneously. They were going to bring down Thornfield with everyone inside. "Everyone out," Commander Walsh ordered, building collapse imminent. But the children weren't running. They were holding hands in a circle, all of them focused on something I couldn't see. "We're not leaving," Zara said. "We're fixing this." The same chorus that had brought children together from around the world now focused on a single task, stabilizing the building and containing the entity's final attack. I watched in amazement as cracks in the walls sealed themselves. Support beams that had been bent beyond repair straightened out. Windows that had been shattered reformed. The entity's self-destruction turned inward, consuming them instead of the building. One by one, they collapsed into nothing, their mathematical forms solving themselves out of existence. When it was over, the building was still standing. The children were exhausted but alive, and the threat was ended. "Status report," Commander Walsh called into his radio. "All entities neutralized," Agent Reynolds confirmed. "Building secure, children safe." "Casualties?" "Minor injuries only. The children handled most of the actual combat." Over the next few hours, cleanup crews arrived to remove the remains of human mercenaries and supernatural specialists. The entities had left nothing behind but some scorch marks on the floor where their true forms had been destroyed. But the real work was just beginning. Agent Reynolds had been aged 20 years in a matter of seconds, and while she was alive, she was dealing with the physical reality of having lost 2 decades of her life. Dr. Marsh arranged for medical specialists to evaluate whether the aging could be reversed. 3 of the tactical agents had also been aged, though not as severely. They were all looking at early retirement and permanent disability benefits. The Department of Specialized Child Services was quietly arranging financial compensation for their sacrifices. The building itself needed major repairs. The East Wing was structurally unsound after the supernatural specialists' attack. The main hallway had bullet holes and blast damage from the human mercenaries. Windows throughout the facility needed replacement, but the most important work was with the children. "We need to understand what happened here," Dr. Marsh said during an emergency session with the department supervisors who arrived that evening. This wasn't just a successful defense. This was a fundamental shift in how Pact-born children relate to their origins. Agent Commander Walsh, who had somehow avoided injury during the battle, was documenting everything for his report. "In 20 years of dealing with supernatural threats, I've never seen anything like what these children accomplished. They didn't just fight back, they evolved." Zara sat quietly during these discussions, still exhausted from coordinating the worldwide chorus of Pact-born children. When asked about the experience, she said something that stuck with me. "We're not the same children who were brought here years ago. Fighting together, choosing together, protecting each other, it changed us. We're not just individual kids with abilities anymore. We're something new." "What kind of something?" Dr. Marsh asked. "A family, but bigger than that. All the Pact-born children around the world, we're connected now in a way we weren't before. If one of us is threatened, all of us know about it. If one of us needs help, all of us can respond." The department supervisors were taking notes frantically. This wasn't in any of their protocols. Over the following week, reports came in from facilities around the world. Children who had participated in the chorus were displaying new abilities or enhanced versions of their existing ones. More importantly, they were all reporting the same thing Zara had described: a sense of connection to other Pact-born children globally. "It's like they've formed their own support network," one supervisor explained during a conference call with Dr. Marsh. "Independent of our facilities, independent of government oversight. They're self-organizing." "Is that good or bad?" I asked. "Honestly, we don't know. It's unprecedented. But so far, they seem to be using this connection to help each other, not to cause trouble." The final piece of the puzzle came when Clover visited again 2 weeks later. She looked different, more confident, more aware of her surroundings. When I asked her about choosing freedom versus staying connected to the other children, she smiled. "That's the thing, Marcus. Freedom and connection aren't opposites. I chose to be normal, but I can still hear the others when they need me. And they can hear me when I need them. The choice wasn't about cutting ourselves off from each other. It was about choosing how we wanted to use our connections." It was then that I realized what had really happened during the battle. The entities had tried to reclaim children they saw as property. But in fighting back together, the children had proven they were something else entirely. A new kind of family, bound not by contracts or obligations, but by choice and mutual support. Dr. Marsh called a meeting that evening to discuss what had happened and what it meant for the future. "Today proved that Pact-born children can defend themselves when they work together," she said. "It also proved that the entities who made those original pacts are not as powerful as they pretended to be." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we rebuild," Zara said, "and we make sure that every Pact-born child knows they have choices, and that they have backup if anyone tries to take those choices away." The Department of Specialized Child Services is establishing new protocols, Agent Reynolds added. Facilities like Thornfield will be expanded and better funded, and children will be trained in defensive techniques from an early age. What about more attacks? There won't be more attacks like this, Zara said confidently. Word will spread through whatever networks entities use to communicate. Thornfield is off limits. The children here have backup from every Pact-born child in the world. She was right. Over the following months, no other entities attempted collection or termination actions. The message had been received clearly. Children who chose freedom or power were under the protection of all their peers. The rules at Thornfield were updated one final time. Rule 1. All children stay in groups when requested, but individual movement is allowed during safe periods. Rule 2. Staff work in pairs during high-risk situations, but normal operations can be solo. Rule 3. Trust adults who provide proper identification and have legitimate business. Rule 4. Emergency alarms are for actual emergencies, but false alarms are not punished. Rule 5. Children may stay in common areas after sunset if they choose, but room doors remain available for privacy. The new rules reflected our new reality. The children had proven they could protect themselves and each other. Our job was no longer to contain them or shield them from danger. Our job was to help them prepare for whatever futures they chose. Some days I still worried about what would happen when the children who chose power reached 18 and had to honor their contracts. But then I would see them training together, teaching each other, building the kind of support network that could face any challenge. They had learned the most important lesson of all. When you stand together, you can change the rules of any game, and that was enough.